Hi folks, welcome back to the Cannabis Corner. I'm your host, Kerry Burns. Really good to be back with you, and I hope all of you had a wonderful Merry Christmas, and I hope you have a safe holiday as it comes up. You know, I was watching the news, the network news this past weekend, and one of the, on the evening edition, and one of the stories that they were talking about was the differences between some of the ski slopes and the areas in Colorado that are treating the legal cannabis from different perspectives. And you know, even in the states now that where we have the cannabis legal and the voters have voted it in, and you look at Colorado where for a whole year now they've had legal cannabis, and crime rate is down, the teen use is down, the overall use of cannabis for recreation and all, of course, is up because it's legal and people aren't afraid of getting arrested anymore. But these are things that we knew back 4 and 5 decades ago in the late 60s and early 70s. We knew these certain things would happen if they ever made cannabis legal again. And certainly the data and the different things that are going on in Colorado prove this overwhelmingly. But even in the states, like Colorado where it's legal, you still have the naysayers and the people who want to pretty much go against the grain of what the voters have voted in and all. And one of the stories that really irked me to no end was this mayor from Breckenridge. I won't say his name, but I'm sure it's well known up there. But they were talking about how in Breckenridge that they had spent a long time building their family image and all, and they've made all of the cannabis shops move to the outskirts of town, even right outside the city limits and all. And I want to tell you something, Mr. Mayor. I take personal offense into your comments that you would even for a second suggest that a cannabis smoker is not a family person. I'll have you know, I'm 60 years old. I've smoked cannabis nearly every day for the last 45 years. I've had 4 beautiful children and raised a wonderful family. All of them turned out to be very successful and very well educated. And I take a personal offense to your comments that you'd make something like that and say that, and even make reference to the fact that somebody who smoked cannabis is not a family person. You know what, sir? I have a name for people like you, and it's called douchebag. But I'm not going to call you that because but if you really think about it, that's what you are. And your comments are not acceptable. And I guess the alcohol that's served freely on the open bars and stuff along the slopes and the lift areas, and certainly the cocaine and I'm sure prescription pills and all, that's your idea of what a family atmosphere ought to be. Cannabis, one thing about it, even in your own state, you've got to look at the statistics. Of course, there haven't been any deaths because there haven't been any since the dawn of time. But look how the crime rate has fallen off nearly by half. Look how teen drug use and alcohol use has fallen off nearly by half. I mean, these are statistics that you just can't run away from. And I'm sure that in the state of Colorado that the use of alcohol by citizens and all of that is down somewhat too, because now they are able to use legal cannabis. But I'm sure that there's been many of problems caused with the people that are still able to use alcohol. And I don't care that people use alcohol. That's their business. That's their God-given right to drink. They can drink till tomorrow if they want to, and that's their business, and nobody should be able to tell them they can't. But the very idea that you can insinuate that if a person smokes cannabis, then pretty much goes against y'all's family atmosphere. It's just beyond reproach. And I hope the voters up there don't vote somebody like you back in, because you certainly are the antithesis of what a free America is all about. But these different things, just like this mayor there had said and all, it's you get to the point where some of these people still just don't get it. I mean, look, not too far from Breckenridge, over in Aspen, one of the dispensaries there, the Silver Peak Apothecary, they've gone even to the extremes of making it like a nice fancy shop. I saw these really nice canisters that they had their cannabis displayed in and all. They were very proud to offer that to their citizens and the people who that are visiting there from different states and also within their own state. And I want to applaud the people there at that apothecary, and I'm sorry that I didn't catch your name on the program, but I salute you, because cannabis is no different than any of the other high-end products that are sold in the shops along Aspen or any of the other cities where they have the legal shops in Colorado. And we shouldn't disparage between cannabis people and people who want to sell cannabis just because we don't think that they're family oriented, as the Breckenridge mayor so eagerly pointed out. But there's a lot of these instances and cases where people who, what I say, they still don't get it. I mean, look at the Institute of Drug Policy that's run by the federal government. The head of that says, this isn't the weed that your parents smoked at Woodstock. Well, sir, I don't know. Obviously, you weren't around back in the late 60s and early 70s when the cannabis that was coming from Mexico, which was most of what we were able to get. We just didn't have the varieties, the Afghani varieties, readily available like they are today in some of the shops and all. But I promise you, sir, the Acapulco Gold, the Panama Red, the Santa Marta Red and Gold from Colombia, the Jamaican weed, all of those were exceptional cannabises, and they would rival any of the stuff that's sold in any of the shops today. And we never see those varieties anymore. If you look at what the weed that's coming across from Mexico right now, the stems from those varieties that we used to get in the early days have way more THC than the flower tops that y'all are so eagerly trying to chase after there along the border with the Border Patrol and the Texas and different state polices along the border. And it's just absolutely ridiculous that people like you can get away with saying that the cannabis of today is stronger than that of yesterday. First of all, this is scientifically impossible. If the cannabises, each time that they were crossed with another variety, whether it was weaker or stronger, improved to a higher concentration of THC, then we'd have strains on the planet that would contain 200 to 300% THC by volume weight. And this is not only scientifically impossible, but just doesn't exist. When a crossing is made between two cannabis strains, only the weaker strain is improved. The strain, if you take a strain that's 25% and it's tested with mass spectroscopy or gas chromatograph, whatever the tests are done, there's a certain level there of scientific error in which the percentages will vary 1 or 2%. And that doesn't mean that we've created a stronger strain or anything like that. If you could find the strongest strain of cannabis, and it's probably one of the Afghani varieties, over there, one of the indican varieties, if you could find the strongest strain on the cannabis that was grown pure, that you knew the progeny of the two crosses, that they were 100% that strain, then you would see that the percent THC would not vary as long as those same crosses were done. Now, there are some anomalies in the testing. There's certainly anomalies made when scientific testing is done, and the percentages can vary by 1 or 2%, even up to 5% in a given strain. This doesn't make it a stronger strain, or oh boy, all of a sudden we have this cannabis that's way stronger today than yesterday. It's just not true. We were getting strains in the late 60s and 70s occasionally from California and places like that were way stronger than anything I've smoked today, with the exception of maybe 1 or 2 varieties, and they certainly weren't better. I would put them on equal ground at best. But the difference is today is that we have more people growing, and we have more crosses that are going on, and we also have some of the varieties from the Far East that we didn't have before. Even the early herbalists from the 1900s, long before I was ever on the planet, you and even our grandfathers and all. There were herbalists back then that said that if you didn't get these strong indican varieties from the Far East, which were very hard to obtain because it was just so hard to find the right purveyors that would get them from the Far East over to this part of the world, that basically you weren't getting much medicinal value out of them. The sativa strains were pretty much not used at all for any type of medicinal purposes. And the old herbalists, for sure, when they recommended cannabis for any of their medicinal treatments and all, they certainly wanted to have the strains that were from the Far East world. And what we're seeing today is a lot of these different strains being brought over, and of course being crossed, with different varieties and all. And the growers should be applauded. We have taken, basically 200 or 300 strains that are indigenous around the planet Earth. And we've, created in excess of 6,000 different varieties today. And many of them are exceptional cannabises, and they do have, higher than normal THC than the strains you'll see from Mexico. But that's just based on the strain. And believe me, if anything, the statement should be made is that it's sad that a lot of these stronger varieties that used to come from Mexico are no longer available. And the reason that they're not available is from poor growing techniques. The old growers that used to keep their varieties straight and not cross them with other varieties all died off, and you have these inexperienced growers now and they don't have the seed that it takes to generate what their forefathers were generating. So sir, the director of the Institute of Drug Policy, please quit saying that the cannabis of today is stronger than that of what your parents used to smoke, because nothing could be further from the truth. And that's, across the board with the cannabis issue, there's a lot of things that are unknown to a lot of people who've never smoked. And obviously, sir, you were way too young to even know what Panama Red or Acapulco Gold or Oaxacan or Guerin or any of those varieties were, because you weren't even around when those things were coming across the border. They were excellent cannabises to smoke. Their THC levels may not have even come close to what the indican varieties are that are being grown, but I guarantee you, sir, the quality of that cannabis in Mexico has certainly gone downhill, and it's certainly the farthest thing from being stronger. And these strong varieties that are now being grown, and they've always been on the planet. It's not like all of a sudden we've created this, wow, we've got this strain of THC that's just, 26.5%, 28%, and oh boy, it's just so much better. That's not the case. These strains have always been around, and it's a matter of trying to find the purity of the strains that keeps those concentrations higher. Every time they're crossed with a weaker strain, just as what's happened in Mexico, the end result is eventually that the seed produced will not be of the THC concentration that the mother plant started out at. And this is sad. I mean, this is really poor growing technique. If the American farmers that were growing food did this, half the population in the United States and part of the world would have starved to death, because we wouldn't have been able to produce viable food for them to eat. And it's no different with the cannabis strains. You have to keep these strains pure, and there's nothing wrong with doing the crossings, but do comparable crossings. Don't try to create, in your efforts to create some unknown, which impossible to achieve THC concentration, and yet at the same time you're actually dropping what you already have to start with, and it just doesn't make sense. But this is really across the board just ignorance, and the people like you that run the Institute of Drug Policy and all, you're ignorant to the facts, and I feel for you, but my only suggestion to you is to go and smoke some cannabis, because unlike another study out that says that it makes your IQ level go down over time, I mean, this is ridiculous. And they show these fancy little color charts of these people's brains, how they're changing and all. You can have these people hooked up to this equipment and ask them different questions, ask them if they like chocolate, or ask them if they like sex or something, and the color patterns change on the deal, just as if they do as these people that are being tested for IQ. And a lot of people don't do well on written IQ tests, I mean, or whatever the nature of the tests are. So I can tell you for sure that the old saying, and the Jamaicans use this one religiously, is that they called it the weed of wisdom. And there's a lot to this. And marijuana, or cannabis as I like to refer to it, it actually helps produce brain cells in the brain. It doesn't debilitate them. And it acts as a facilitator, as a neurotransmitter in the brain. It doesn't hijack the brain and take over all the senses and everything. It's the only neurotransmitter that's ever been tested that showed retrograde transmission. In other words, it's able to cross the synapse back and forth at will. There are no neurotransmitters in the brain that show this type of activity. This alone is a very earth-moving fact, and the fact that the cannabis, the THC, has this ability shows that it is not only a neurotransmitter itself, but a facilitator for brain action. Certainly not a debilitator. And research is already showing this, and it eventually will prove this to be true. So, Oh, I mean, there's so many people out there. You just ignore the facts about how safe cannabis is, and the fact that nobody's ever died from it, and nobody's ever been to the hospital for it. I mean, and we have a textile industry that's just being, just shunned and put aside just because we have public ignorance worrying about children getting hold of cannabis to smoke. I mean, it's just, it's beyond even stupidity. It's almost at the stage of, I wonder really if the alcohol and pill abuse that many of you probably must be doing, that's what's debilitating your brains, and you just can't possibly see what's going on here. I really feel for you. I really think that the best medicine for you and many of the people like you is go ahead and try some cannabis, smoke some. See if it doesn't enlighten you a little bit. See if you don't think a little bit better, think a little bit more deep into things. See if it doesn't give you energy and make you do things that you normally wouldn't be doing or even thought of even doing. I think you'd be quite surprised, because that's the experiences I have every time I smoke it. And it's always been that way ever since the first time I ever took a puff off a joint when I was 15 years old. And I really do think that a lot of you need some serious psychiatric evaluation, because you just blow by all the statistics, like the fact that it's never killed anybody or taken anybody to the hospital. Doesn't it mean anything to anyone out there when you look at how much alcohol and cigarettes and prescription abuse kill out there? I mean, and all those pretty much are legal or legal by prescription. How do we continue to put up with in a society of ignorance that just ignores the facts? It's unexplainable to me, but I hope all of you really just will look at the Colorado project, even though there are some problems there. Certainly the prices for the cannabis are way too high, and the taxation rate is just ridiculous, and all this is going to do is make the illegal market flourish, because you can buy street cannabis of those varieties, every one of them, for about half of what the dispensaries are selling it for, and you don't have to pay the sales tax. And this is what one of the biggest fallacies of what's going on up there. The whole idea when cannabis was first made illegal by Nixon, well, not by Nixon, but when he passed the Controlled Substance Act, which really put the thumb down on the cannabis users and people growing cannabis and all, this is what really drove the price up for the illegal market. This is what built all the cartels, all the gangs, and everybody thrived on the money they were making, and they were charging exorbitant prices because it was illegal. And yet when cannabis finally becomes legal in the United States, what does it do? The price goes up even higher, and then to top that off, we add a 25% sales tax to it. And so I frown on this, just from the depths of my soul. Cannabis should be cheaper. It should be grown organic everywhere. It's simple to do. There's no problem. There's no difficulty in growing cannabis. The problem is getting the right seed and getting the knowledge to people who want to grow it and teach them how to grow it properly. The price would fall through the floor. And you can throw all the profits that could be made from selling recreational cannabis or cannabis that people use for, if they want to use it for medicinal purposes or whatever. You could throw all of that money and profit into the garbage can by comparison to what the hemp industry itself would bring. This is where the golden nugget lies. And we are just sitting back here in the society in America where we could be making all of our fuel from hemp. We could be making most of the products that come from oil that we're strapped down to from the Saudi Arabias and the different oil producing countries around the world. All of these could be produced from the hemp plant and grown way cheaper, and make the products, food, fuel, all of that, and all of the things that spills off, which is more than 50,000 products, all of these could be made cheaper and available to the American public, and really build an economy here like we've never seen before. We're already seeing the boon of the economy in Colorado just from the cannabis sales. Imagine what that would be like if you took that 1,000-fold. The cannabis industry in the United States, even at this illegal jacked up price, is less than $30 billion a year, whereas the hemp industry would be $1 trillion industry. $1 trillion compared to 30 billion. I'm sure you don't have to do the math too much to understand how many zeros are past the 30 billion. I mean, come on. This is where the money really lies, and our country is just, we're all swallowed up in these naysayers and the people like this guy that runs the Drug Policy Institute, and also the mayor up in Breckenridge and all that, with with these ideas of old that were all fabricated, all these lies that were fabricated by the government and the different powers that be just so they could enforce and lock people up for cannabis for the last 4 and 5 decades. All of this has got to stop. And once the truth is out and all, cannabis really from a recreational standpoint, if a person wasn't able to grow their own and all, which most people would be able to do, would be extremely cheap and would sell probably for about what tobacco sells for on the wholesale market, which is around $1.50 to $2 a pound. And then we would see the hemp industry come alive. And this is where not only the economy for the entire country would be on a boon, but we would have products and fuel and things that are way much better for our society than what we've got now. So the best thing people can do out there is to get educated. Smoke some cannabis. My God, it will stimulate your brain. If you're one that's not smoking, you probably need to, and hopefully you're not stuck in a rut like these people, like the Institute that run the Institute for Drug Policy, and some of the well, not some, but most of the people there in Washington, the federal government and all, and particularly the Drug Enforcement Agency. So educate yourself, smoke some cannabis, understand that this is an herb, understand that it's extremely safe. It has never hurt anyone, never has killed anyone. And I am a walking, living testament. I'm not abnormal. I'm a normal, everyday person. I know many of my friends are just like me. They smoke cannabis all their adult life. None of them have had any issues of any type. They've never been incarcerated. We've never, not held down a job. We've never not raised wonderful families. And I just think that America needs to wake up to the facts, because the lies have been pushing this issue way too long. And I thank you for joining the Cannabis Corner.